Hello everyone, and welcome back to Autonomia, the show where we bring ideas from the libertarian left to everyday people, and foster conversation on what we believe in hopes of proving that we all have far more in common than we are trained to believe. My name is Hayward, and I am your host. As always, our intro and outro music come from a song called A Bigger Cage is Still a Prison by System Failure. If you'd like to look up this song, the band spells System, C-I-S-T-E-M, for political reasons.
There's nothing I want more than to sleep under the night sky, hear the animals as they go about their lives, feel the fire warm my body, feel the mud under my toes, but tonight this cell keeps me enclosed.
So, for some reason I think that it might have some benefit to go over conversations that don't go so well in terms of cross-partisan outreach, especially in situations where the points being made are not even necessarily partisan, but people are so thoroughly inculcated into the idea that we need to be having this culture war at every given second, that they can't have a rational conversation without having their defenses go up. So in this particular instance, I have an interaction that took place on a prepping page that I follow. So I am, as you probably have put together through previous episodes, a prepper. I am someone who believes that the world is in a bad situation and individuals and communities can benefit from being prepared for disasters. And specifically from a leftist perspective, I believe that our world and our society is in a constant state of disaster. So the crisis is now. And so how do we increase our resiliency through the crisis of just struggling to make our days easier? Anyway, that's its whole separate episode. I just wanted to give a little bit of a background here as to why me, a left anarchist, is in a prepper group on Facebook. It's because I like talking to people across partisan lines, and I think prepping is important no matter what your ideology is. So someone posts a article from survivalhacks.co about how to survive global civil unrest. So whatever. I didn't read the article. What I was specifically commenting on is the cover photo for this article is at least 5 police cruisers completely smashed. One of them is burned out. The one in the middle ground, which is the primary subject of the photo, appears to just be a Crown Vic police cruiser. All of the windows smashed out and all the doors open, and on one of the doors is spray painted the slogan ACAB, which stands, of course, for All Cops Are Bastards. Another version of this that you will frequently see is 1312, which is, of course, just alphanumerics for ACAB. And so, not wanting to start a fight because Casual Preppers is a very strictly non-political Facebook group, even though it absolutely has political dimensions, because people don't often consider their own position to be inherently political. It only becomes political when people dissent from the dominant view. And so my comment is, yeah, there's going to be a lot more folks fighting the government like this as things get more unstable. And this older guy comments, "Bud, that's not fighting the government. That's destroying your neighbor's property." I said, those are police cruisers, which are not private property. Also, the police are the first line of defense of the government. This isn't a partisan argument here, just simple facts. And with the world getting more and more chaotic, we are very, very likely to see a lot more folks fighting their governments, which, again, is something that we see already and see all over the world and have seen escalating around the world. And so this person follows up with a comment, burning property that my tax dollars pays for is not fighting the government. Protest, looting, and burning is not on my agenda. I followed up, that makes zero logical sense. The government is funded by tax dollars. Therefore, fighting the government means fighting what your tax dollars pay for. It's pretty straightforward. This has nothing to do specifically with protest, looting, and burning. I am talking about how fighting the government involves government property getting damaged. Find me a rebellion or a revolution without government property getting damaged, and I'll show you something that wasn't a revolution. This guy replies and completely owns me at this point and says, okay, soy boy, so cool. When someone boxes you in and shows that you're just not having a rational argument, you have to resort to silly slogans, insults, slander, whatever, in order to try to attack the character of the person that you're losing the argument with. This is a very common tactic I have when talking with conservatives online because, as I often state, it does seem that their political view does not hold up to scrutiny. And again, this wasn't really me criticizing their political view here. This was me just remarking on a photo of government property being destroyed. And this person was so offended by that they felt the need to jump into some sort of culture war that didn't have to be a part of that conversation. So I followed up by saying, okay, boomer, I'm not making a political statement here, but you sure are. All I said is that there's going to be a lot more folks fighting the government, which is what's being pictured in this post, as the world gets more chaotic. Police are part of the government, and police cars are government property. We are going to see a lot of folks fighting them as the world gets more chaotic. What is the problem with your basic threat mapping and analytic skills? Grow up. And he just replies with a laughing face, and the conversation ends there. And so it's astonishing to me that the conservatives consistently seem to believe that the police are not part of the government that they are constantly skeptical of. It seems very strange, especially when you consider all throughout history, the entire purpose of policing is to defend the government. That is what it's for. That is why it was instituted, and that is why it remains. And that is why they have military-grade equipment, even though they refuse to go in and help people in a school shooting, for example, despite all that equipment. But you better believe they'll use that equipment gleefully when crushing the rights of civilians when the government is threatened by the civilians. This is very, very hollow reasoning here. It does not stand up to scrutiny, and it lays bare just how clueless a lot of these people are through no fault of their own. They're very deeply propagandized people that just have no ability at this point to engage in critical thought, and that's incredibly depressing, and that's why I'm so skeptical of oligarchic media dynamics, because you have a situation where people never leave the company store, as it were, but the company store is their mind now. This is very dangerous. This is very problematic. And when people don't understand what side the government is on and what side the government's primary defense force is on when the rubber meets the road, what hope do we possibly have at making social change? Because whenever people actually go to try to make the world better and have serious social change, there's a line of armed police ready and willing to tell you no, and if you refuse to go home, they will hurt you. And we see instances like this shooting that just happened at the time of this recording. There are stories of police pulling their tasers on parents that are actually brave enough to go in and get their children and go in and fight this shooter when the police officers were not willing to go in and do that fighting. Apparently they went in, took fire, and withdrew, during which time several more children were probably executed. This is unbelievably disgraceful, and when I tried to talk to conservatives about this, saying this is absolutely damning, they said, well, maybe they were just told to stand down so the shooting could occur. To which I said, that's worse. You understand how that's worse, right? If you, I can understand not being willing to do the type of bravery that is necessary in times of a terrible mass shooting in order to protect the innocent. Like, I can understand cracking in that moment and giving in to fear. What I can't understand is you are in a situation where maybe you want to go in and defend those people, but you're too cowardly to risk your damn job. That's absolutely pathetic. And to make things worse, you're willing to obey orders in a situation where people are going in to try to save their children and you're pulling your tasers on them. Like, that's the kind of situation where it's amazing that that cop didn't end up dead on the ground, because that's what he deserved. You cannot prevent parents from trying to save their children when you're too damn cowardly to do it. And if you're more obedient to the law than to common decency, then it just lays bare who you are and what you're worth. This is absolutely disgraceful. This is absolutely damning, and there is no recovering and no excuse from this sort of behavior. That level of cowardice is completely unacceptable. Morally, ethically, spiritually, anything. And Americans need to remember that police have no legal duty to protect the public. That's not what they're for. Even Dana Lash, who is no left-wing person by any stretch of the imagination, said repeatedly when they had the Coward of Broward situation happening, the courts have repeatedly ruled that the police have no direct duty to protect you. So, why do you keep licking this boot? Like, I can't imagine how many people out there still have a thin blue line flag with the slogan, "These colors don't run." No, they don't run into a building when children are being murdered. Perhaps it's because this is personal to me, being a father of two, or perhaps it's just I have a soul, and because I have very frequently been willing to put my body on the line for the things that I believe, and I live with permanent disabilities because I put my body on the line for what I believe. When there are children at risk and you are not willing to risk your own safety to protect those kids, you are beneath my recognition as far as I'm concerned. I will never see anything but a monster in you. I think they should all be stripped of their badges immediately, especially when you consider that Uvalde puts 40% of their municipal budget into policing, and the Uvalde Police Department's Facebook page posted a picture of their whole team dressed up with ARs and kitted out with all sorts of tactical gear, and saying like, hey, look, we're ready to protect our citizenry. No. And that's why I don't believe in when many conservatives say we need to have more police in schools, or we need to have more police around to protect people. We need to fund the police more. All you're doing is making a bigger gun that's pointed at your head for whenever you decide to tell the government no. And depending on your level of social privilege, the time at which you say no might be sooner or later, but when you say no, that gun that you've been happily funding will be pointed at your head and it will happily pull the trigger. The police are not your friends as an institution. You might have friends that are police, and those friends might go out to help you. But in instances where it really, really matters most, you can never rely upon them. And if you ask people that are of a lower social privilege within our society, they can tell you that. An instance of this happening to me was when I was driving my boat to go get some ice cream with my brother and a few friends. I made a right-hand turn to go get some fuel in a nearby harbor, and the steering cable snapped. And due to the way boats work, the boat went into a 90-degree turn almost instantaneously at about 40 miles an hour. I was able to grab the person next to me at the time, and in that split second, I was not able to grab my brother before he was flung out of the boat and run over by it. I wasn't sure what happened to him or where he was. There was a lot of blood in the water, and his head popped up, and so I saw that he was at least conscious and able to swim, and he raised his hand, and his arm was cut to ribbons. It had been hit by the propeller. So we stabilized his injuries. We got the boat to a point where it could work, and we sort of were able to steer it by physically holding onto the engine and turning it by hand. We got to the point where we were able to get to a spot where emergency services, the actual heroes, were able to help us. And eventually we were towed to shore because that's a safer situation than trying to maneuver a boat by physically twisting the engine. And when we got about halfway into the harbor, the medical responders met us. And so we transferred my brother into the medical boat to be given proper medical care because, you know, all of us had like a little bit of background in medical work, but none of us were really equipped at that point to stop that level of bleeding. Like, he was gray at the time that he was handed off to medical care. We had stopped the bleeding, but due to the severity of his injuries, he lost a ton of blood. We weren't sure whether or not he would get to keep that arm or not. And so he's whisked away and gets the medical care that he needs. And as we arrive into the harbor about 5 minutes later, we see about 15 police officers on the docks. What are they looking for? What are they here for? I called for medical care. I didn't call for the armed thugs of the state to go trying to find ways to extort more money from me at the barrel of a gun. I spoke to, very politely, a female officer with DEM who agreed with me that the cause of the accident was a snap steering cable. I showed them that the steering wheel has no response. It snapped. He was thrown out. We stabilized and we brought him in. It was a mechanical failure. And this officer agreed and followed up by searching my boat for anything she could possibly find to fine me for. I was unable to produce the registration at the time because I was a little frazzled. I couldn't look in every compartment of the boat for it. And so that was like a $2,400 fine that they levied against us. We had the wrong type of throwable device, a throwable flotation device. And so that was another, I think, $2,000 fine. And we had 2 or 3 other fines that were put against us for things that had literally nothing to do with the accident that took place. They took this opportunity to profiteer off of disaster. So while I'm still covered in someone else's blood and I'm still surrounded by just a boat that is normally white that looks like we just destroyed a shark in it, when that's happening, these people feel so comfortable just racking up more and more bills for a family that's going to encounter a tremendous amount of medical bills. They felt comfortable doing that. That is disgusting. And the newspaper had the gall to say that the police department assisted in the rescue effort. The rescue effort was done by the time we made contact with the police. All the police did was show up and steal from me. That's all they did. And I called him out for saying these people showed up to steal. These people showed up to extort. These people showed up to commit something that would otherwise be a crime if they didn't have a special protected status by the state that they swore their loyalty to. They are not your friends. They cannot be relied upon as an ally. They defend a class that you are almost certainly not part of. And if you don't understand that, you will sooner or later encounter that very harsh lesson unless you're at the very upper echelons of society. You will probably encounter that lesson, and you'll probably encounter it too late to make a big difference. So maybe listen to what people have been saying for generations since police departments were first instituted and understand what they're for. And understand that when the rubber meets the road, they're going to act a certain way, and that certain way is not in your best interests. And sometimes cops do heroic things, but sometimes people do heroic things. Being a hero is not part of the job of being an officer. But sometimes officers do heroic things because that's what people do. And to call someone a hero just because they're a cop, especially if you're right-winger, is incredibly ironic because aren't you against participation trophies? I thought that was sort of a liberal SJW thing, but somehow every cop is automatically a hero regardless of what they do, especially considering the rates of domestic and sexual abuse that happen among police. You just give them that regardless of knowing anything about them, or what people's rights they've trampled, or what terrible things that they've done, or what terrible things they've stood by and watched happen. Think about how many cops were at that mass shooting, and not a single one of them said, "Fuck this, I'm going in." Not a single one of them saw that guy pull a taser on parents and tase them and didn't say, "No, we're not doing this." Not a single one did that. Just like not a single officer pulled Derek Chauvin off of George Floyd. Just like not a single officer decided, "Hey, I think we're going too far," when they were beating the stuffing out of a person that I was next to during my first arrest. Not a single one. They always back their own before they back you. How can you ever trust these people? The only way you can trust them is if you are profoundly ignorant, and God bless you for having an understanding that sheltered, or if you're so high up in the system you know you'll never have to go up against it. Either way, if you believe in freedom, you can never trust the people whose job it is to defend government power. Anyway, I've been ranting again. I'm trying to experiment with expressing ideas in a very free-flowing way, and this meandered from somewhat of a light-hearted expression of an unexamined irony that many conservatives had, to making it a bit personal. And I think that's important. I think we need to share our experiences with each other as a means of finding a shared truth. And I'd love to explore any of these ideas and more with people, because I am very committed to exploring ideas and figuring things out together. I think that's our only hope. I think we need to talk to each other. You know where to find me. Facebook page is Autonomia, AFTONOMIA. And the email is autonomiapod@gmail.com. That's AFTONOMIAPOD@gmail.com. I look forward to hearing from you, and in the event that you decide it makes sense to help me fund all of the podcasts that I like to fund, you can contribute to the Patreon page at Autonomia. Patreon.com/AFTONOMIA. I happily accept any sort of contributions, though I certainly don't expect any. I try to send whatever money that I can in any given month to the causes that I believe in, or to the people that I believe are putting out important information. And I think a lot of you, the more you explore this world, might find that you have been so sheltered by an oligarchy that keeps you in a media bubble that there's probably a lot of catching up to do. Or at the very least, there's a lot of exploring that has to happen in a world that has been very systematically hidden from you. Maybe you find something you like here, maybe you don't. But like I said, I like to try to fund those people because they do a lot of very incredible work that you will not see in mainstream media. And if anyone wants to help me with funding that, or helps me offset my costs in doing so as a construction worker averaging 14-hour days, I would certainly appreciate it. Have yourself a great day, and don't trust authority. Just kidding, I'm back, and I have more to say, and guess what? I'm still fucking angry. I found out this morning by seeing an old post from the Uvalde Police Department on their Facebook page that literally every member of their department a couple years ago got a special grant so they could all get level 4 ballistic plates for their body armor. And for those of us that don't know how body armor works, level 4 is the highest categorization. It can take a direct hit from a .30-06, which is to say a very large bullet. In older times throughout history, a lot of countries used larger bullets because engagements happened over a longer distance. One thing to illustrate that is in Germany during World War I, their Mauser rifles had their sights zeroed at 400 meters, which is to say, if you are shooting at something under 400 meters away, you have to aim down. So bullets were different back then, and they had to be much larger to propel their bullets a lot further. And about around the 20th century, when urban warfare became a lot more common, a lot of countries gradually shrank the sizes of their bullets because it allowed you to carry a lot more, and most engagements are maxed out at about 300 meters. So as a result, they made a change. And so that's where you get a bullet like the AR-15 fires, the 223. It's, by comparison, a much, much smaller bullet. If you Google 30-06 versus .223, that's 30-06 versus 223, you will see the difference in size between these two bullets. Level 4 plates can stop an impact from one of those. Those sorts of bullets nowadays are only used by hunters and snipers for the most part. So that's incredible. Level 4 plates can take quite a few impacts from a 223 before they start to deform and lose their protective ability. And yet, the Uvalde Police Department still engaged in their atrocious behavior when they had access to that sort of equipment. I knew they had body armor, but I didn't know they had level 4 plates. I figured maybe they had, some sort of soft armor that could stop, maybe a few pistol rounds. No, they had it as high as you can go, and they still failed to act. This is why you don't militarize your police, because they do nothing for you. But they can absolutely do something to you. Anyway, I'm still angry, and the more I hear about it, the angrier I get. And maybe, just maybe, I'll encounter some more information before I get a chance to edit and release this episode, but we'll see how it goes. In the event that more comes on, look forward to hearing from you soon. Otherwise, have a great day.
'Cause there's nothing I want more than to sleep under the night sky. The animals as they go about their lives. Feel the fire warm my body, feel the mud under my toes. But tonight this hell keeps me enclosed. For if we don't have our freedom, if we are captured by their iron hands, then the vision for fire, it burns so much more bright. There's no justice in the system, a bigger cage is still a prison. Well, I hope that somewhere someone breaks free tonight.